My presentation today is Beyond Appetite, looking at new aspects of food behavior. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. My title is Divergent on Main Street, Eating Better for Less. What are the various influences on eating behavior? So let me begin with an uncharacteristic, provocative statement. As a nutritional epidemiologist, it is a matter of regret to me that nutritional epidemiology in some cases has done a disservice to the general public. We have done so by, first of all, reducing foods to individual nutrients or dietary ingredients. That was the first part. And the second part, some nutritional epidemiologists have claimed that they can link a given food, a single nutrient, a specific dietary ingredient to health or to disease risk. And in some cases, those data were based on cross-sectional studies, which actually do not allow you to assign causality. So as a result, we have reduced foods to good calories and bad calories, good fat, bad fats, good sugars, bad sugars. Everything is good and bad. Things are either good for you, bad for you, with no nuances or anything in between. The problem is, and this is where anthropology, sociology, economics, and other humanities come in, those people will tell you that we cannot separate the food from the individual, and we cannot separate the individual from society. So instead of talking about nutrients and food ingredients, we really ought to be talking about food patterns. And there are two promising approaches to this. First of all, the dietary guidelines, as you will see later on, is now talking about nutrient-dense foods and dietary patterns and healthy patterns. And of course, we have our symposium here tomorrow looking specifically at the nature of dietary patterns across the globe, from France to Asia to South America to the United States. The importance of patterns is becoming more appreciated. So the problem that we have in nutritional epidemiology is there are just too many confounds. If you go from a nutrient or a food to a disease, there are many, many things in between. We place much too much faith in linear adjustment. There are some things which cannot be adjusted for, and in some cases, they are not even part of the model. So when you read a paper and it says, we have adjusted for all the confounders, believe me, they have not. It's an illusion. And I'll just deal with a couple of those confounders, which are really very significant. Eating behaviors, food prices, diet costs, and since I now do research on geolocalization, don't forget location, location, location. It can determine what you eat and what you weigh. So let's, first of all, start looking at the family dinner. So you've seen it in the press. There is one school of thought that says that having a dinner as a family together prevents childhood obesity. And there's another school of thought that says eating out promotes obesity. Of course, remember, eating out, people very often conflate with fast foods and conflate that with a specific fast food brand. In fact, eating out can include dinner at grandma's and school and sports events and everything else, eating away from home. So let's just take a look at that. So first of all, it is true, based on data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, that fewer Americans eat at home. So we know that the diet is too high in saturated fat, sugar, and sodium. It's too low in the recommended foods. And an increasing amount of the budget is spent on foods away from home. According to some studies from the USDA, foods consumed away from home are less nutritious than foods consumed at home. And the USDA at some point has equated each meal consumed away from home with extra pounds gained in the course of a year. I don't quite believe that because it was based on cross-sectional studies, which really do not permit that kind of a conclusion to be made. But be it as it may, the family dinner is becoming increasingly mythologized. It's supposed to be healthy and good and linked to all kinds of benefit, both social and psychological and economic. Now, even so, manufacturers of packaged goods will appreciate that. Most of the calories really still do come from the grocery store. which is kind of interesting. About 66% of total calories come from the store. A small proportion come from restaurants, including fast foods. The proportion from schools is absolutely minuscule. It depends on age. It can be between 5 and 10%. The amount of calories on the average from vending machines is nothing. So the focus really ought to be on foods consumed and sourced in grocery stores. And when you start looking at, first of all, where the food is coming from, you will see there are very strong patterns by age. So age is a major confound. Many of the studies are not stratified by age. They do not look at age effects. What you see here, for example, is the sourcing of calories from various sources. Store in blue, QSR, quick service restaurants in red, full service restaurants in pink, then school in yellow. Notice it's only for the young ages, and then someone else and other sources. So notice, for example, that in red, fast food restaurants, the proportion of calories varies dramatically by age. It is not going to be young children. It is going to be teenagers and young adults, and then the consumption drops precipitously. So if we're talking about a given type of food, a given source of food contributing to obesity, think about that, and notice, of course, that the 15-year-olds are not obese, but the 60-year-olds are. The consumption goes exactly in the opposite way, which means you've got to be adjusting for that in addition to everything else. So age, big thing. Eating out, big thing. Next one, cooking dinner as a family. Does it improve diet quality? Now, when we start looking at the frequency of meals consumed at home, there is one way of getting answers to this question. The National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey consumer module does ask the question, during the past 7 days, how many times did you or someone else in your family cook food for dinner or supper at home? So these are not home-cooked meals. These are home-cooked dinners. And notice some people say never, about 10%. Few just do it 1 to 3 times a week, but about 45%, just under a half, do it 6 or more times a week. So daily or dinners at home, about half of the population. Okay? Slight difference. Actually, there's no difference between men and women, but there is a huge, gigantic difference by age. So who eats nightly home-cooked dinners? Is going to be the young and the old, meaning that you see a U-shaped distribution. The youngest, the children, yes. The older adults, yes. Teenagers and young adults and singles and people up to the age of about 40, they eat out with much greater frequency. So now I'm saying, now you have confounds by age and family structure and by eating out and eating in. All those things influence food choices and diet quality. They really are very difficult to contain in a single adjustment model. Then, of course, the number of home-cooked dinners is linked to a number of things. You don't have a home dinner. It is not randomly distributed in the population. First of all, what you can see here is that large families are much more likely to have nightly dinners at home. So the likelihood of having a dinner at home every night of the week increases precipitously with family size. So when you look here at both children and adults, in a set of bars to the left, you see how the frequency of dinner at home increases with family size. So actually most likely to have dinner at home are going to be large families and families with children. Then another set of questions asks about another aspect of eating, and this is the togetherness. The previous question is about cooking dinner, home-cooked meals. This one is about meals together. Again, remember, meals together do not have to be home-cooked. Many meals in North America these days are sourced from a supermarket or directly from a fast food restaurant, and yet they're consumed at home together. So another question, who is eating together and who is eating alone, a very important topic to be addressed by Claude Fischler tomorrow, we're seeing that adolescents and young adults are more likely to eat alone. And of course, if you eat together versus where you eat alone, you may be choosing different kinds of foods. So eating with someone, eating alone, those things make a difference as well. And as you see here, there's also a confound by age. Married adults, families eat together. Single professional adults tend to eat alone. And this kind of goes into major trends in the food industry that we all know about. Actually, interestingly enough, my research these days is almost indistinguishable from marketing research. We do it looking at health endpoints. We do not look at purchasing power. We kind of do, but the data that I'll be showing you are the kind of things that marketing research often just dream about. And I'll come to that point in just a little while. So, least likely to have dinners at home, teens and young adults, single parents, African Americans. Interestingly enough, higher socioeconomic groups are the ones who eat out more. We have this idea that lower middle class and lower income groups do not bother to cook at home. They simply order in or go have a pizza or Kentucky Fried Chicken or whatever. Absolutely not true. It's the exact reverse. It is actually going to be the opposite. Recent immigrants, Mexican Americans, Hispanics, large families, and lower education and income groups are more likely to have dinners at home. So again, those are the various confounds of the family, the environment, the family structure, income, education, and so on that affect our food choices, not to be controlled for in an easy model that says we have linked consumption of saturated fat with heart disease, adjusting for all the covariates. I'm saying it cannot be done. So another component here is looking at who complies with dietary guidelines. And the question I'm asking is, does cooking at home allow for better diet quality? Now, you're all familiar with the Healthy Eating Index 2010. Our Healthy Eating Index is a 100-point scale developed by the USDA to measure compliance with dietary guidelines. And each new set of dietary guidelines is followed by a new Healthy Eating Index. So we have got Healthy Eating Index 2005, Healthy Eating Index 2010, Healthy Eating Index 2015 has not come out yet because the guidelines were just released a couple of weeks ago, but there will be one. So Healthy Eating Index 2010 measures compliance with that particular set of guidelines. They are operationalized to a 100-point scale, and they include both foods and nutrients. The biggest component of that is the so-called empty calories or SOFAs, solid fats and added sugars. There's a 20-point score, and in HEI, higher score means better compliance. Now, there's one component of the HEI. Actually, there are some components of the HEI which are more linked to the diet cost than others, because obviously you will appreciate that if you want to have a diet which has got whole fruit as opposed to juice, seafood as opposed to bologna sandwiches, leafy greens as opposed to potatoes, believe me, it's going to cost you. So one issue that has been somewhat contested is whether or not does it cost more to eat a healthy diet. And the current consensus seems to be is that it does, and we've been saying that for a while. So when you look at the American population, again, National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, and you attach national food prices to the national dietary intake data, and then divide the population into 5 equal groups, you can see that as you go from left to right in terms of quintiles of diet cost, your healthy eating scores go up, which means it is more expensive to eat healthy, and it also means that the more costly diets are healthier. There is going to be a correlation, and notice that this correlation extends to various subgroups. For example, as you increase the food expenditures, your fruit, your vegetables, your total fruit are all going up, and your empty calories are shrinking. Higher score means better compliance. So there is a huge effect of cost in the Healthy Eating Index. It costs more to eat healthy. But It doesn't have to. Another complication. So when we start looking at who eats at home and who eats out, things change. Because here we find that the frequency of cooking dinner at home per week on the left is associated with higher healthy eating index scores at no extra cost, whereas the frequency of eating outside the home in a variety of sources, it could be the worksite cafeteria, is associated with lower diet quality at higher cost. So this is kind of interesting because now you're looking at eating in, eating out, which is confounded by age and family size and family structure, and then you have the cost. And then how are you going to be linking that to, say, the incidence of diabetes in the population? There are many, many factors here that we are taking into account. So yes, home cooks eat better for less. We are beginning to call this nutrition resilience, the ability to eat better for less, which means the ability to procure foods from the supermarket, being able to cook them, being able to prepare them at home for dinner or for another meal can be associated with higher diet quality at no extra cost. And again, the families that do that are going to be families with children and lower income groups. Nothing is randomly distributed. There is always a pattern. Another component of this, and this is where I come to geolocalization, is this. Diet quality is also determined by where you live. We have been doing some interesting studies in Seattle, King County, where we look at a very different measure of socioeconomic status. We do not think that self-reported incomes are any good, although they're being used in just about every single study I know of. First of all, people do not like to tell you. About 1/3 refuse to tell you, and even if they tell you, it is not a very good measure. Education is better. The French and Europeans use occupation to denote socioeconomic status. In the United States, we do not do that. But in Seattle, King County, we do something different. First of all our respondents have their addresses geocoded. That allows us to go to the county tax assessor and look up the value of their homes. Those are publicly available data. And we construct a measure of socioeconomic status based on property values. So the property values for King County look something like this. On the left is King County, on the right is metropolitan Seattle, Pacific Ocean on the left, Lake Washington on the right. And what you see here is that, obviously, the waterfront properties are more expensive. Properties in the center of town, close to industry and the airport, are less expensive. Okay, so there's a huge socioeconomic gradient. Property values stretch out the socioeconomic scale from, say, $25,000 a year to $75,000 a year, which is what you normally see in health studies. You can stretch it out from 20,000 to $6 million. So the veil of privacy is actually stripped. You know exactly what the socioeconomic status is. And what we find interesting is the following. These are data at the census block level. Those data we can get from the tax assessor because those are data available at even tax parcel level, even finer level of resolution. Joining such data to health behaviors or to body weight has been impossible because health and behavioral data do not exist at this level of resolution. You have to do a bit of microsimulation, and this is what we have done. So here we now have healthy eating index 2010 plotted at the level of the census block. This is absolutely unprecedented. This is beyond cutting edge, even in marketing research. I'd be surprised if anyone else has got behavioral data at the level of the census block. Here I'm plotting healthy eating index, but I can also plot the consumption of cereals, potatoes, salads, and so on, anything at this level of geographic resolution. We can also, using clustering analysis, find out whether people eating salads also have neighbors who eat salads or not. Notice here that diet quality is very much determined by socioeconomic status. Waterfront properties have a higher diet quality. People living in the center, densely populated center of town, lower income housing, diet quality is not so good. And I can also tell you that the obesity map at the same level of resolution at the level of the census block is almost exactly the same. For some reason, waterfront properties have been spared the burden of the global obesity epidemic. It does not exist in that neighborhood, which kind of raises interesting points about addiction and exposure and impulsivity and predisposition to addiction, because if all the addicted people live in the center of town with the red areas, they not only share some psychological traits, they must be sharing the same real estate agent who steered them into a specific neighborhood. So obesity map, diet quality map, very strong influence of socioeconomic status, and we can start disentangling those things. So based on those data, and in many, many confounds, we probably need to revise our approach to nutritional epidemiology. The conventional approach has been something along these lines. One nutrient, one disease. One vitamin, one disease risk. Good, bad, indifferent, but everything was linked purely going from nutrients of foods to health outcomes. Back in the fall in Berlin, we had a symposium called Going Beyond Nutritionism, Insights from Sociology, Economics, on Food Choices, and Dietary Behaviors. And the idea here was to bring in people from the humanities and the social sciences to tell us more about patterns and how those patterns could be influenced by the social and cultural environment. So my kind of approach is to say this. First of all, the current procedures go from single nutrients or individual foods to health outcomes, and then we try to control for all the covariates: demographics, socioeconomic status, culture, behavior, geography, neighborhoods, and so on. I say that those things cannot be controlled for. This simply cannot be done. And we should not really be ignoring them, because once you've adjusted for something, you can no longer study it. My thought would be to look at drivers of food choice being socioeconomic status, culture, society, and behavior, and that dietary patterns and nutrients and foods are merely elements in the pathway. And we should be reconceptualizing everything, looking at what the social sciences can bring to the table, adjusting for diet quality, because after all, in some cases, diet quality may not be as important as you think. When I was preparing my presentation for Berlin, I was sitting next to Barbara Burlingame, and I said, we're trying to bring in sociologists, anthropologists, economists to the table. She then remembered something called the Gießen Declaration, which some of you may remember. I said, what is this? She said, well, it was put together in a Schloss in Germany, and I can get you the text. So I actually went to the web and looked up the picture of the Schloss. And indeed, back in 2005, there was a meeting held in this castle close to Berlin, apparently, and the participants and declared the following. That's on the next slide. They said that it is time to reformulate nutrition science to include social and environmental as well as biological dimensions. Nutrition science includes the study of food systems and the environment, and this expanded nutrition science ought to be the basis of food and nutrition policies. And I say, absolutely, how come it has taken 10 years to even think about that? Things in nutrition move very slowly. We need to expand nutrition science to deal with all those issues. And as a result, I'm absolutely thrilled that the dietary guidelines do emphasize eating patterns. They do emphasize nutrient density. They emphasized healthy eating patterns for all. And most important of all was a phrase in the executive summary of the Dietary Guidelines 2015, which was this. There was an emphasis for the first time on culture and society. The guidelines embody the idea that a healthy eating pattern is not a rigid prescription. It is an adaptable framework, which does include personal, cultural, and traditional preferences, and also very important, This was the first mention of the budget that I have ever seen in dietary guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. We have time for 1-2 questions until 10:35. They're going to have a break. So if anybody has a question.
Thanks, Adam. That was a wonderful talk. The worry I have about the dietary patterns is how we control for all of those confounds that are specific to the patterns. Each one is different.
Oh, yes.
Well,
it's exactly right, which means we, even with NHANES, we are sometimes limited to 30,000 people. Not really enough. If you're going to be doing multi-level adjustments in all of those domains, you run out of numbers. And also, what does it mean to control for socioeconomic status? Is life on 50,000 a year exactly 10 times better than life on 5,000 a year, or is it just a whole new world? So I think there are limits to linear adjustment.
Perhaps I missed it. When you talk about the you're going through the neighborhoods of Seattle, et cetera, and I apologize if I missed it. What's your definition of quality of food? So you say they're eating better and better quality food. What's your definition of that?
On the slide that you saw, it was actually the Healthy Eating Index 2010. So this is the formal USDA measure of diet quality measuring compliance with dietary guidelines. That paper was just published in the current issue of Preventive Medicine. So you can look at that, and the methodology is described. Yes.
Thank you. This was very informative. In one of your earlier slides, you had a slide showing the percent of calories consumed by age group, or the total amount of calories from different sources.
Yep.
And it showed that older people do not get as much of their calories as young people from eating outside. Was that true as the percentage of their calories? Because they certainly consume less.
Yes, it's still true as percent of calories. It's true absolutely, and it's true as percent of calories. Those data are also published. I believe it was in +1, but I can get you the exact reference for that, yes.
Okay, thank you.